We'll recess so members can finish questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the ranking member as well, and Mr. Chairman Gensler. Given that we're into a countdown to default because of my Republican colleagues and their failure to permit a vote on legislation to lift or suspend the debt ceiling so that we might, the richest country in the world, pay our bills, the hearing should really be about, in my opinion, the adverse consequences of the richest and most powerful country in the world failing to pay its debts because of politics. And questions to be answered would include, what will the adverse consequences of default be on auto loans, things that impact a good many people, mortgages, the stock market? What will the adverse consequences be on our $100 trillion capital markets, the largest in the world, I might add? The adverse consequences on the dollar as a global reserve currency. And what are the likely adverse consequences on our need to attract investors to our treasuries in the event of a default? Of course, a question of paramount importance would be, what is the likelihood of a Republican recession? So, Mr. Gensler, let me ask you, please, as it relates to our global reserve currency, a default, what do you prognosticate the consequences to be on our status with our global reserve currency?
Representative, it's hard to predict because we'd be in uncharted waters, but it'd be quite disruptive. The base of our markets is U.S. Treasury, and you would envision that there'd be more risk in that market, less liquidity, and that it would cost more as taxpayers to raise money. In terms of the U.S. dollar, how it probably would be in more volatile times, but what would happen to its rates is hard to predict. But in terms of homeowners and the capital markets, we'd be in for a lot of volatility, and we would take a hit in terms of future investors thinking about our capital markets in the same way. They'd have to price in the risk of this instability potentially happening again.
This is a good segue into the question with reference to the adverse consequences on the need to attract investors to our treasuries. Our treasuries are considered the best in the world. People believe that their money is secure when it's in an American treasury. What would be the consequences?
Again, it's hard to predict, but it'd be quite disruptive, quite volatile, and uncertain.
I thank you for your commentary and would close with this. It seems to me that we should understand the importance of suspending or lifting the debt ceiling such that we don't get into these uncharted waters. Because once we're in these waters, we may extricate ourselves, but the impact, the adverse consequences can be something that can last for a moment. And I'm using a moment in a rather loose way because it could be much longer, obviously, than a moment. And I would hope that as you make your commentary to persons in these meetings that you have with them, that you would let them understand to a greater extent than we might share in the public our position with the reserve currency and the impact. There is a war for currency supremacy, and currently we're winning, but we don't have to have this esteemed position forever. It can change. Your final comment.
Okay.
I think you're correct, and it's what I was trying to say to, I think it was Representative Timmons earlier. Part of our agenda is trying to ensure that our capital markets stay the most efficient, most resilient, and fair, so that we become and stay the destination of choice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We will now reconvene immediately following votes. The committee stands